Okay, welcome back. It is July 11th of 2015. We're going to continue with Franz Brentano on the foundation of ethics. And we just finished looking at his conceptual analysis of the foundation of ethics. And now he wants to give a little mini presentation on how we form the lexicon of ideas, of psychical ideas, that we use to compose that sign model in the analytical work. So it's the very initial stage of forming the lexical content that we're going to store in the mechanical memory. And it begins with a sensate presentation of the ideas in themselves. He said that the ideas initially exist as a potentiality in the ideal being of God. Every conceivable idea exists in this way as a potentiality. But we do begin with an axiomatic expansion that Sophia knowledge is the supreme value, and that Sophia knowledge is the right end, the ethical and the eschatological end of our posited model. And he says that sensual pleasure must be limited or negated because it curtails the acquisition of the ideas, and the ideas in themselves constitute the fundamental class of knowledge. In other words, you must begin with this foundational area of presentation, of primary presentation, before you can move into that transitional area of the mode of presentation, of secondary presentation, where the secondary object is confronted by the individual perceiver's experience, which is the second moment. And so second moment, we move on from primary presentation to secondary presentation of the psychical idea, and the secondary object is simply to be affirmed or rejected, says Brentano. It's purely existential judgments that are performed here in the mode of presentation, in the modality of presentation, where secondary object is presented as the psychical idea of the object. Now the pleasure in inquiry itself inaugurates the transitional moment in this realm of presentation, in this realm of secondary presentation, I should say. And this realm has eschatological value because it will lead to that knowledge that we need in order to acquire a true internalization of a psychical idea. And that is the third moment where we actually will form an internalization of the psychical idea of the in itself of the object. It's its true essence as the psychical idea. And in order to do this, of course, we remember from our previous lesson that Brentano always combines epistemology and ethics. Remember, he began with the true, the good, the better. Remember that triad. So he always wants to show how the good can evolve out of an epistemological base. And so he's going to address internalization both from the point of view of epistemology and from ethics also. So he says that the secondary objects that we acquire in that transitional moment become loved as correct in this third moment, and those are the ideas that are taken up in this realm. They're the ideas as beautiful, and the beautiful here is the beautiful in the classical Greek sense, or more appropriately for Brentano, it's Aristotle's sense, because he is firmly centered in Aristotle. And the beautiful is that beautiful as ethical nobility in the Greek concept. So it's really the ideas that are ethically noble, they're taken up as those that are the correct or the higher ideas that need to be acquired for knowledge, for this knowledge that's going forward, for this axiomatic expansion that we started with that said that this Sophia knowledge is a supreme value. Well, in order to model that supreme value, we need the higher valued ideas, the ideas that reflect the ethical nobility or the beautiful in the classical Greek sense. The way this happens is the affirmed secondary object in that transitional moment is coupled with imagination within the perceiver's experience, and then this exchange, this reciprocal interaction between the secondary object and the experience of the perceiver results in the acquisition of the beautiful ideas, or the higher, more noble ideas of eschatological knowledge, performing that Sophia type knowledge. And remember, Sophia knowledge is at the psychical level, and of course that's why he uses Sophia knowledge rather than Gnosis knowledge, because Brentano never leaves the psychical realm. He never transitions into cogito. He always remains at the level of psyche, the level of the Dekunta threshold, Aristotle's Dekunta threshold, the dialogue that dialogues at the level of psychognostic evaluation and psychognostic acquisition of the lexical content. And so it is an affirmed secondary object coupled with the imagination working at the level of psychognostic investigation in order to acquire these higher ideas through dialogue at that dialogue threshold. But it is this exchange of dialogue, of the mutuality and the reciprocal dialogue of the interchange of secondary objects that are acquired by different individuals. What is the psychical lexical content? How can we refine that content through dialogue? So these become the preferred ideas over ordinary ideas. There is a hierarchy of lexical content for Brentano. There's going to be a hierarchy of ideas, and that hierarchy is going to determine which ideas get transferred to long-term memory, or I should say, which ideas get transferred to mechanical memory and thereby have a chance to become part of long-term memory. They'll never reach long-term memory unless they first make it into mechanical memory as being held as noble ideas. So before the transfer to mechanical memory, these ideas as the beautiful or the noble must pass through the feeling percept of believing the object as a realized noble idea. There's always the coupling of the motivational emotion that is coupled with the psychognostic gnosis at the level of knowledge, at the level of psychognosy. And the reason we have to partition these ideas is that Brentano says in Note 7, mechanical memory is finite, and it has a limit point, and an individual perceiver can only harbor a certain number of ideas that are functional or higher ideas, categories if you would, for our sign model of the eschatological true and the eschatological noble. We can only we can handle so many ideas up to a limit point of our finite mechanical memory. Mechanical memory does have a limit point. But this internalization within the mechanical memory of our lexical content of these noble or beautiful ideas, the ideas of the beautiful, already constitutes an enrichment of existential life just in this first internalization. And every internalized idea is accompanied by a feeling percept. Remember, he says that affirmation is always coupled with love, and rejection is always coupled with hate. There's always an emotional feeling percept that accompanies every idea, and that holds true for it being stored in the mechanical memory. It is stored with an accompanying feeling percept, which can function as an entrance node when we recall those ideas. A lot of times, when you recall an idea, you recall it through emotion. So a feeling percept can become an entrance node to an idea stored in memory, because we will recall these for the analytical or evaluative work of forming interrelatedness later. Remember, we've already discussed, we move on from the ideas to analytical judgments of relation and the first moments of forming that sign model. But he wanted to give us a very brief, this is a very brief little essay here. He just wants to introduce how we first acquire the ideas. And he wanted to point out in this lesson that the ideas are going to be a potentiality for the good in themselves, even at this very fundamental level, because we do some psychognostic work of partitioning, even at this very first level of acquiring the lexical content. We do perform some hierarchy work, some partitioning, because we want to retain the ideas that will reach, in a Hegelian sense, you would say that they are the ideas that reach the level of category rather than concept. The ideas that reach the category that will help form the major areas of the model. But Brentano is basically saying the same thing. He's saying there is a hierarchy, and we do want to retain the ideas as beautiful as the higher psychognostic point of our lexical content within the mechanical memory. So it is still a very, even though we've got 3 moments here, these 3 moments really all make up the first moment of the larger triad. Remember, we're still working on the true, and we haven't even moved beyond the first moment here. He's just pointing out some of the finer points of the acquisition of the lexical content of ideas, of the psychical internalization of that idea that first is a generalization, but then becomes lifted to signification. And that signification has to pass through imagination. It has to be a secondary object that is acquired, coupled with the experience and the imagination of the perceiver, and then through an internal dialectical psychognostic work of the individual self, the generalization can be raised to a sign. And we have to do this work, we have to do this partitioning, because mechanical memory has a limit point. It is finite. It has a limit point. The brain is not unlimited in its capacity. Mechanical memory has a limit point, and it can, and we can cognitively, at the level of psyche, psychognostically, we can hold so many ideas within mechanical memory in our lexical content. So it's a very compressed view of the first moment of acquiring ideas. It's kind of an exploded view of looking at the finer points. But you notice in that third moment there is a little mini triad of secondary object confronting the imagination of experience of the perceiving self in order to reciprocally become an internal dialectic that can reach the idea of the beautiful or the Hegelian category, and thereby reach the higher level of the hierarchy of ideas and qualify for being transferred into mechanical memory, coupled with an emotive entrance node, a feeling percept entrance node. So it gives us a real quick look at kind of an exploded view of the acquisition of ideas. And we'll pick up from 182 next time.